So Omaha's own Terence Bud Crawford defends his WBO welterweight strap against Jose Benavidez. He knocks him out with a wicked uppercut in round 12, which came out of nowhere. You know, I thought the fight was going to go the distance. I thought he was going to win via decision. But he caught Benavidez with a wicked uppercut. And then after that punch landed, like, Benavidez was out of there. And he finished him off. I have to say, this fight was more competitive than I thought it would be. I thought Terence Crawford would be winning against him much more easier than he did. But it was very competitive for the first 5 rounds. I thought for the first 5 rounds, Benavidez was actually in a competitive fight with Terence Crawford. But then Terence Crawford started... I think the effects of Terence Crawford body shots started playing a major factor, because in the second half of the fight, Benavidez just started slowing down, and it was, you could tell he was breathing heavier. He looked like he was gassing out, and I think it had to do with the fact that he was getting hit with so many body shots. Terence Crawford kept throwing body shots. One thing I learned, one thing I think about Terence Crawford, though, is I don't think he's a big puncher at welterweight. Terence Crawford was a big puncher at 135, 140, but I don't think he's a big puncher at welterweight. I think the welterweights, because they're naturally bigger than him, they're able to absorb his punches a lot better. And I think when it comes to the welterweights, I think he's able to beat them based off skill rather than punching power. The good thing about Terence Crawford is he's a very skillful fighter. I like his rhythm. Terence Crawford has this rhythm, this way he fights is like an in and out rhythm. He's like bouncing up on his tippy toes. It's really fascinating to watch Terence Crawford fight. Terence Crawford, this is how he normally fights. He tends to figure out his opponent. Sometimes he's in a competitive fight, but then after like the second half, he tends to figure them out, and he figured out Jose Benavidez. I remember when he fought Yuriorkis Gamboa, the first 5 rounds were very competitive. Some people might have had Yuriorkis Gamboa up ahead, but then he figured him out in the second half of the fight. But yeah, this was a big welterweight that he fought. Jose Benavidez was not just undefeated, but he was like 6 feet tall. So he's a natural welterweight. So this was a big welterweight, and he was, getting, basically eating everything that Terence Crawford was landing on him. So it just goes to show you that Terence Crawford isn't a big puncher at welterweight, but he basically broke down Benavidez. It took 12 rounds. But after 12 rounds of constant body shots, and then he finally weltered him, and he finally caught him. I think it took Benavidez by surprise, because he wasn't throwing uppercuts throughout the whole fight. He was throwing a lot of body shots. He was throwing a lot of right hands. He was throwing a lot of hooks. He was throwing check left hooks. But he wasn't throwing uppercuts. So I think Benavidez wasn't expecting that, and he got caught off guard. But it was a wicked punch. It was a really nice punch. But I don't think Terence Crawford is a big puncher at welterweight. But he looked impressive in there. So once again, Terence Crawford has a thing where he fights a lot of undefeated fighters. That's all I like about Terence Crawford. He's fought several undefeated fighters. This is another fighter that once again he has took his O. He gave Benavidez his first L, his first one. So once again, Terence Crawford beats another undefeated fighter. Again, this was the biggest opponent he's ever fought. He's never fought somebody this big. This guy's like 6 feet, 6'1". The tallest guy he fought before then was when he fought Victor Posto, who I believe was 5'10", 5'11". So gotta give Crawford credit for fighting these much bigger fighters. Benavidez was in his prime. So hopefully now we could get the Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. or even Sean Porter. I want to see him unify, because now he's had 2 fights at welterweight. The big question for Terence Crawford was, could he compete with the welterweights? I do think the welterweights are way more better fighters, and they're much more tougher fights for Terence Crawford. So far he's had 2 fights at welterweight. He beat Jeff Horn to become the champion, and now he just defended his belt against an undefeated fighter, Jose Benavidez. So let's see him face either Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, or Errol Spence Jr. That's really the only 4 guys I want to see him in there against: Porter, Garcia, Spence, or Sean Porter, because I think those 4 guys that I just mentioned are the best guys at welterweight besides Terence Crawford. He beat Jeff Horn and Jose Benavidez at welterweight, but I don't think these guys are as good as the 4 guys I just mentioned. So I want to see him face one of these guys. I would like to see him unify with Errol Spence Jr., but even if he doesn't fight Errol Spence Jr., I would like to see him defend his belt against somebody like Danny Garcia or Sean Porter, unify with Sean Porter, because, like I said, I think if he's able to beat one of these guys, that's when people are going to take him serious, because I think people respect Terence Crawford, but they don't look at him as the best welterweight because of the fact that he hasn't fought a top 10 welterweight at welterweight. He wiped out the 140-pound division. He fought the best guys there, but he hasn't fought the best guys at welterweight yet. That's what I think. If he wants people to stop, to basically stop doubting him at welterweight, I think he has to fight one of the top 10 welterweights: Garcia, Porter, Spence, Thurman. And if he beats one of them, then I think people will start giving him respect as a welterweight. I think he has the talent to do it. But like I said, I think he'll be in tough fights with these guys. I don't think it's going to be easy for Terence Crawford to become unified champion. I think he has the skill set, the talent, but I don't think he has the punching power that some of these welterweights have. But it makes sense because he's a natural smaller guy. This is not a guy who's a natural welterweight. He turned pro at 130, 135, so it makes sense. It makes sense. This is how it should be when you're a smaller guy, you move up in weight. It should be more difficult for you to face these bigger fighters because they're naturally bigger than you and they could take your punch. So I expect Terence Crawford to, and I said a long time ago on my original channel, I expect Terence Crawford to struggle at welterweight. But yeah, I wanted to see him face any of those 4 top 10 welterweights just to see if he's able to beat them and dominate them, because then that's when people will really take him serious as a welterweight. I still think he's the pound for pound king, but I want to see him defend his belt probably next year against one of those legit dudes, because then that's when people will really start taking him serious. I think people still doubt him because of the fact that he hasn't fought like a top 10 welterweight yet. They respect him as a fighter because they know was undisputed and everything, but he hasn't fought a legit. He's fought 2, Benavidez and Jeff Horn were good fighters, but they were really like top 15, top 20 welterweights. I don't think they were top 10 welterweights, just my opinion. So I want to see him in there with one of those guys. Anyway, guys, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching, and subscribe, guys. I'm out.